right, everyone. Well, welcome back to episode 8 of the Grimdark Filthy Casuals podcast. First podcast of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Here with our Filthy Casual Rogue Gallery, we've got Nick Powell. Nick is the head moderator of the Warhammer competitive subreddit. Nick, what have you been up to since our break, the COVID break?
The COVID break. So the last 12 months, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Been doing a lot of introspection and focusing on other aspects of the hobby outside of actually playing in games and tournaments. Got big into 3D printing, which has been a boon.
That's
has been a big boon to, that's an understatement. I got a 3D printer for Father's Day and then almost immediately got a second one. And I've been printing a lot of game aids and fun little GDFC tagged stuff for the gang and, dice and dice holders and bits and all kinds of fun stuff to modify my White Scars and my Indominus set. So it's been a lot of fun. It's a whole hobby in and of itself. So
that's incredible. I'm so jealous of you.
The guys jokingly call my workshop and office the sweatshop because it's just all I do is build and paint terrain and make dioramas and display boards for the channel or for Armies on Parade or 3D print stuff. Like if there's
little
ever
kids running around,
knocking everything over.
I have a couple toddlers as well that make it difficult at times, but
soon you can put
that is the majority of
their allowance.
No, they're 3 and 2. They have no allowance.
Clean the chem tray, get your money.
But
they better start saving if they want to play Games Workshop games.
I don't think they'll have anything to do with that. They're very, very they're like the ballet type versus the.
Speaking of ballet, and
wait for the new race, the new GW race is going to come out.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah, they're going to reimagine the Drukhari as ballet.
That's fine. That's Harlequins.
That's how they should be.
Yeah.
That's Yildari. But speaking of grace and beauty, we have the Bayou Badass, Dustin Quibido, with us here as well. Dustin is something of our resident local TO. Dustin, what have you been up to so far in the break?
Oh, I've been hobbying like crazy. I ended up painting about 200 Imperial Guardsmen over the course of the autumn, and my wife
got about like 100 points.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I've gone on an exploration of the Ork Codex for 9th edition, as some of our readers may have seen, exploring lots of different niche builds. That's still an ongoing thing. The whole COVID stuff has really kind of put a kibosh because it's tough to find games with real people. Most of us are dads, and we have a responsibility to not risk our kids getting infections, things like that. So it's really tough. So I've been dabbling in some other stuff. Got into Black Powder a little bit, and the new Dire Chasm for Warhammer Underworlds is super strong. So yeah, when 40K is not too accessible, there's other stuff to play.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Dustin. And we have soon to be Dr. Brian T over here. Brian, how's your break been?
Well, remember, that's GW soon. It's going to be many years off. But, I was like, how can I make myself a bigger nerd than I am? So I was like, well, let me go back to school and study some biology. Definitely interested in applying to med school, and hopefully we'll get some more news for that this coming year. But as Dustin said, it's been hard to kind of get games, so it's been a lot of theory crafting, list writing, and with the Space Wolf season, I guess that is, Psychic Wigan kind of came and went without really getting to play it too much. And then the new supplement kind of came out, so just dying to really get into that Crusade content, especially, and looking forward to the day where we can get some games in and maybe bat reps sometime in the future. Hopefully things go smoothly this summer, but we'll see.
In the near future. But I'll brag for you because I know you won't, but you're something of our resident TTS tournament guru. I know we started off COVID, and I think you won that Northern Front TTS tournament, and then Dustin, you helped facilitate the Dragonfall TTS tournament, and correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you win that one as well?
I did. I did win the GDFC event, which is good, defending the home turf. But it really comes down to, I do have a lot of good players in the area to play, especially in Chicago. Dustin and you, Brian, are an excellent sparring partner as well. So having a quality.
Ouch.
I would say you two, if we got a chance to play more often. But I will say our last bat rep got pulled because it was such a big stomping.
That was pre-Codex Necrons versus Space Wolves.
There's no proof of it. There's no proof that it exists. Which for
Only
anybody
fans
who
content.
doesn't know, we have to. So we filmed the bat rep, and literally a day later, like all of the new content, like the new codexes were released, and like after spending 80 hours of trying to edit this film, we're like, well, I guess we just have to scrap it at this point. But that
Just
was
like
on
that.
for sure.
It was-
Yeah, I mean, old Necrons versus new Space Marines was definitely one of the world's most one-sided fights.
Yes, indeed it was. We didn't have any, we didn't have any of the new unit sizes or anything. Like the Necrons needed a lot of help in the Codex, and they got it. But 8th edition Necrons in general were tough. The Indominus units helped a little bit, but it wasn't gonna matter. Versus
They still, and they
Psychic Awakening
stuff
Space
didn't
Wolves,
gel. They didn't
buddy.
sync up.
and Ragnar.
Right,
Oh my god.
Now, to be fair, Nick, Brian he scored a perfect game against my Eldari list, so don't feel bad. He scored a perfect 100
also
against
just
me.
very good.
Cross it
Yeah,
off the
I
bucket
get
list.
it.
Cross it off the
I'm not
bucket list.
upset. I was glad that I would have been happy to have that bat rep out there and just see what people say about me. That's fine. But I'm also a little glad that it's not.
No proof. It doesn't exist.
I
Well,
got the
it's
10 points for painting. So there's
This is
that.
true. I don't even remember what the score ended up being. It was something like 11 to 97 or something like
No.
that.
First, it was 97 to 17. Let's calm down.
No, I think it was 95 because there were 5 points I couldn't get, I think.
I thought it was 97.
Because I took
might
a
have been
10-point
95.
secondary.
That's true.
The secondaries
That's
were only
true.
10 points.
Yeah, that's true. I think you took Bring It Down against me, and I think you got 10. I deployed a couple scramblers here and there, and I was doing my thing. It's just Ragnar eats
He's filthy. He was filthy.
anything for lunch. Yeah.
Pretty much. Well, Brian, it's glad we have some guys that have a lot of TTS experience, because that's primarily how most of us have been getting games in during the lockdown and the pandemic. But as for myself, so I'm an admin now of the Chicagoland 40K Facebook group, as well as the 40K Adeptus Custodes group. So that's been pretty cool. Also, over the last couple of months, I started a new job, and I've got a kid on the way in like the next 3 weeks or so. So I got my last
soon.
game. Yeah, it's our fourth kid number 4, another chaos spawn. We'll see how this one turns out. But it's been pretty crazy over here, as you can imagine. And I ended up getting my last game in right before Thanksgiving. I actually got in pretty close to 50 games in person since 9th edition, counting them all up. I was getting about 3 games in very early on in 9th, and then when COVID hit, we were trying to be very safe. But right around Thanksgiving, we figured things are getting out of hand. Things are spiking. We don't want to be promoting bad social behavior, so we kind of shut everything down. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And with the new FAQs, the erratas, the changes, we thought this would be a great opportunity to get the squad back together, talk about some of the changes. And we have a lot of hope on the horizon with some vaccines, I think with a lot of safety protocols that are getting put in place, and we're all hoping that we're going to be able to get back to in-person games, maybe even events and such, maybe later in summer, looking at fall here in 2021. So with that being said,
I think I think summer is optimistic, but I hope I'm still hopeful for Dragonfall in the fall. But I mean, if we could go to Nova, that would be incredible. That would be tops.
Fantastic.
Hey, Adepticon, all those players should be thanking their lucky stars that the 4 of us can't be there this year. I'm serious. I would say that a lot of the faces here very well could be having a chance going to the second day at Adepticon. So.
Yeah, I was all geared up for last year. It's like
I know.
First
It's so funny.
Season.
Yeah, I was
practice all these things.
I was super pumped for last year too. I was like, if I don't make top 20, it's going to be a disappointing day. But then, what was it 2 weeks later? Everything was canceled. I'm just like, no,
not even.
Oh,
It was
it's
the
one of those. The
Saturday
writing
before.
was on the wall. The writing was on the wall, though. You're like, like in the bottom of your heart, you knew like Adepticon's not happening, but you're still just like, it could turn around. But
my mech guns will never be as good as they were that March of 2020.
That's true. That's so true.
They were pretty good in August of 2018 when you and I played.
Well, I think this is as good as a time as any, but we figured let's go ahead and talk about some of the changes here through the FAQs, the erratas. We're not going to go over every single one of them. It makes more sense, I think, for us to talk about some of the changes that we feel are going to have a bigger impact on the game in of itself. So I mean, we'll start off with the core book changes, some of the rare rules. Nick, are there any that really caught your eye that you wanted to highlight here as we get started?
Yeah, I first want to say I think the FAQs, the erratas, I think GW did a lot in this round that just kind of showed their hand a little bit as far as what kind of stuff they're looking at, the types of things they're taking into account. I think the one thing that nobody expected to get was an entire redone PDF of all the points in the game. I think that's the first time GW's ever done that for 40K. And it showed that they're willing to make adjustments before a codex, before the GT pack, before a chapter approved, if necessary, right? And so I think that was really huge. And I think just seeing, they did a lot in terms of just clarifying some things that, rules as written, we kind of understood what was intended. We had a lot of people sort of gathered together and just sort of decided, in the community, competitive community, hey, if we play it like this, how it's written, it breaks the game. So let's play it like this instead. And there's a lot of that. And so GW did a great job of coming in and just saying, yeah, no, that is how we're going to rule it moving forward. Not to say that, anybody was right or wrong about what the intention was, but just that, hey, we're going to clarify some things. We're going to make it easier for people who are learning the game to play the game without having these kind of head scratchers. And it just makes the game a little bit faster and makes, a lot of it's just very common sense rules changes that I think aren't going to have huge impacts, but just make the game a lot simpler. So
helps us move
I'm excited
forward.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of that, I was going to say one of the things I loved about it was really the as if movement phase, being an Eldar player. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit, Nick?
Well, I think, we mentioned, I moderate the Warhammer competitive subreddit, and we have a weekly question thread every week. That
this one never showed up before, right?
Never. No, this is the first time I've ever heard this question. No, it would show up like multiple times a week where people would get into deep arguments about specifically Fire and Fade was the one. Hey, can I use this to get back into a transport? Can I use this as a normal move to use, to snowball into these other effects or what have you? And it was one of those things, it was a perfect example of, as a community, everyone kind of decided, well, if we don't treat it like a normal move, it breaks the game in a lot of other ways, including allowing you to just move the 7 inches into engagement range of people without having to charge them and stuff like that. So, wonky stuff like that. And GW just clarified that, no, any of the old rules that say, hey, move as if the movement phase, counted as a normal move, right? And I think that's the right move. I think it just makes it very easy. It is intuitive, like that's how they should play. And again, I think it shows their hand that when we see a Craftworld Codex, a Drukhari Codex in a month or two or whenever, we'll see that verbiage on Fire and Fade, kind of reinforcing that. So I like that, tip my hat to them that they said, don't wait for the Codex. Here's what we're going to do with those abilities.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Glad to see him clean it up. As Nick says, there was plenty of discussion on the subreddit, so I'm glad to see the argument finally settled.
Yeah, it's just marrying old phrasing with new phrasing. And
absolutely.
I think it's just a holdover. Like the FAQ was really just like a little breath of life, just kind of help the game kind of keep moving while things are slow at the moment.
Totally. And I don't think it's game breaking. I think there was a lot of people who were, and even our article, talked about, oh, now I can take my Dark Reapers and I can Fire and Fade into a Wave Serpent. And I don't think that's going to break the game. I don't think that's going to be like the hot new meta or anything like that. But that is now a thing you can do. And I think it just helps clarify, again, it just clarifies a lot of those sort of weird interactions to make things a little more simple. So
it was either you could Fire and Fade and embark into a transport, or the option was it's not a normal move, therefore a special move, and you can Fire and Fade after coming in from reserve, or do something wonky like that. So I think this is the right move. It does align it with other of the newer verbiage like Edict Imperator, which would allow the same. It counts as a normal move. So I'm all for that.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Do you want to talk about aircrafts?
This is another one that excited me. And it's one of those things too. I had a conversation with Justin Curtis online about it a little bit too. He's part of the FAQ team, and he, is also one of the play testers and stuff. And it was just the way that they ruled it, I think is really, I think it's just a smart way to rule it. They didn't just say, hey, yes, when an aircraft leaves the board, they can drop their bombs, which is what a lot of us had sort of assumed was the intention. That is how the rules were written in the core book. So that, that was pretty black and white. But it wasn't intuitive. A lot of people felt like new coming to the game that an aircraft leaving the board, well, they're not on the board. How can they drop a bomb?
Right.
And you had these long discussions about how, well, technically any unit can use any datasheet ability when it's off the board, as long as the interaction makes sense, right? You have things like Gilliman giving you 3 command points, right? Well, if he's not on the board, he still gives you those command points. Like that ability doesn't stop working, right? Stuff like that. So, but again, it's not intuitive. So you have those long conversations. This just makes it really easy. Yes, you can do that with a bomber. You can go off the board, drop your bombs, but they also added a little bit of a clarifier, which I think is really genius, that you treat it as the base stopping at the edge of the table when you drop your bombs. And so to me, that reads that, if I have a board edge and a unit right here, I'm not flying over them. I have to have space to put my base somewhere, right? And so now you have to be a little more careful about how you maneuver in order to do that. So I think it's a great way to rule it moving forward. It kind of gives everybody a little bit of peace of mind. You can do it. It's not as easy. I think it's a good rule.
Yeah, I agree. And Dustin, I know this is the way that we've been playing it pretty much throughout. Yep, with the burn of the bombs.
Yeah, drop that payload and fly off. Yeah.
Well, speaking of intuitive and rules that seem to make sense, does anybody want to talk about the reinforcements and charging up terrain? That one I'm still scratching my head about.
I mean, I thought it was, unless I'm misinterpreting, I thought it was just basically as written.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like clarifying the fact that, you just have to get within engagement range.
Right.
Meaning within an inch horizontally and 5 inches vertically. So
Right.
It's Pythagorean theorem, baby. We all saw the image where it's got like the triangle. Like, come on, 6th grade math. Get those, 8-inch charges. Love it. I love it. Now I don't have to haul around this printout to games like, oh yes, I can't have an 8-inch charge from Deep Strike because you're on the second floor.
Dustin keeps his dice in neat little cups so he knows how many he has, and a protractor so that he knows.
You joke, but I had to print out of a template of how bases honeycomb properly to get maximum attacks when I went to LVO. So I was tired of having the argument of like, what do you mean you could have 3 ranks? What do you mean you could have 4 ranks? I'm like, no, look, it's mathematics right here. It's all in black and white.
Yeah, see, it's math.
That's a bad sign when the orc player is busting out math. You might be a little outclassed.
This is what GWs made me resort to.
I can fight in 4 ranks because I believe I can.
Yeah.
Fair.
Anything? Sorry, go ahead.
No, the only thing I was going to say is I agree with B-Tabs and Dustin that it is just how the rules are written. I mean, you measure base to base, and whatever angle that is, that's the distance. I do think it was funny though that they printed in the FAQ, they did the math wrong. If you're 5 inches up and 9 inches away, then the distance is actually, I think it's 7 inches.
It's 7,
is what
yeah.
you need on the chart.
Like
they put 8, so now people are jokingly arguing that, well, no, they said it's 8, so the math actually doesn't matter because it says 8. Like, it's just funny. It's just there's always going to be something.
Right.
I've had it happen twice where I've enjoyed the 7-inch charge coming out of the jump, and it's like, what does Brian say from Tabletop Titans? It's like going to Candyland. It's like the most exhilarating feeling whenever like the person you're playing has actually put them on like the third floor. Like, oh yeah, let's see those lucky 7s. Let's see it.
It's just, for me, it's just one of those things that breaks the immersion. Like, these guys are on top of terrain. They have the high ground, and clearly you're not overestimating their power because all you need now is that 7-inch to nail that charge. But I mean, it does make a lot of sense. It just feels wrong to me. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting a ton of attacks in normally. I mean, depending on the kind of terrain you're using. So it's not going to be, you've got a handful of guys that are making their attacks versus the whole squad, and you can't pull off wraps and stuff like that. You can't tri-point, and some of that stuff's kind of gone with 9th anyway. So I mean, I think I get it. It feels like, hey, I'm 20 feet up in this ruined building. How are these orcs, magically appearing through sheer psychic will and then leaping up 20 feet to come chop me, or at least my ankles? But
yeah, they got hops.
I did pull out my calculator. It is 7.48 inches, so it would still be an
so it's over
charge.
8-inch charge. Very nice, thank you, Brian.
To be within an inch. But again, like if they are just working to clarify rules that were already sort of in place, that's a good thing too, right? Again, it just helps new players make sure things are clear. understand. And some people were kind of getting on them like, oh, it's so wordy that they go through all these explanations. But again, I think you hit the nail on the head, Nick. It's basically for the newer players, people coming into it, and just it never hurts making sure things are clear.
Right. No, that makes sense. Great point. How do we feel about psychic actions?
I love it. I think it's great. People are down on it because it makes it a little bit harder. But coming from, from my perspective, I think there's a lot of wiggle room now in future codexes. I say this as a Thousand Suns player who has not played with a Thousand Suns in over a year. It's
the problem, Nick. You've got like 18 armies, so you got to get in that army rotation.
Well, no, with Psychic Awakening, I was very excited about it, but it was during COVID. What we're gonna do?
Right.
But it's one of those things where looking forward to the new codex, there's a lot of room there for them to write rules in for these psychic armies. Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, even Craftworlds, I would say are more psychic than most. Tyranids, definitely. And there's room for them to write rules in there now that interact with these psychic secondaries, right? So I think that they've set themselves up well for that kind of thing. Right now, there's not a lot out there, right? The big one everyone's complaining about is Brotherhood of Sorcerers. Doesn't give you an extra 6 inches to the range with which you can, complete the secondaries, which if that were the case, I think that would be crazy. Scoring these from 18 inches away, it would be insane. They would immediately jump up, I think, a couple tiers in the meta. But, I think the way they phrased it, I think, opens them up to more options, which I'm all for.
Being able to deny it is great too, because I would love there to be more incentives for an army to take 1 or 2 psychers, because right now it's so binary. Either your entire army, like every single unit, is a psyker, or there's absolutely none. That way you could get Abhor the Witch. And for me, it doesn't feel as thematic. I think most armies, if they can bring 1 psyker, it feels good to have that 1 psyker. That way you can engage that phase of the game. This gives you just more reason to do it, to have that chance of getting off that single deny to deny that point.
And I know we'll talk about that later, but I am absolutely thrilled about the change to Abhor the Witch.
Absolutely.
I think everybody is.
Grey Knights player and an Aldari player who just had 100 points dropped on him from some Space Wolves. So
I just want to see more psychers for my hounds to kill stuff.
Fair enough. Was there anything else from the core book changes that are worth talking about? Anything like transports or something that you guys wanted to go into?
I think the transport stuff we don't have to go into, there's a lot there on transports, but it's all very common sense. They just clarified.
Same with the always fight first last type of stuff. I thought that was common sense. I think most people tended to play that way anyway. Although what would be interesting is the Custodes have that one stratagem for 1 CP that isn't precluded, I think, in interrupting that sequence. So that might still be a viable option for them. But other than that, I think that makes sense as well.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny. It's a return to form because, again, sort of as Nick was saying, it's not like the rule was always intended this way or another. It's just how they want to rule it from this point moving forward. Because back in 8th edition, things like Vexator Mask or Armor of Rust used to stop you from interrupting. Then they FAQ'd and said, no, actually, you can still interrupt. And now they sort of backtrack to no, we actually want to have these fight last abilities be a little bit more powerful and preclude you from using the counter offensive strat. So
I like it as a person who loves the Vexator Mask.
Yeah, especially as an army, the Space Wolves that are very good at controlling the fight phase. I like it a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Anything else worth diving into?
The next changes are the biggest on the GM.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about your favorite, Brian?
Well, my favorite really is the change to the secondary players or the second turn players scoring on the final game turn 5. Just having the ability to score sort of at the end of your movement phase puts a lot more meaning into the phase, because before, the player has the first turn, top of turn 5, he can just move off all the objectives, and you don't have to care about them.
Right.
This gives a little bit more caution to a player in that sense, because now you're giving a big advantage to the second turn player, but you have to wait till turn 5 to do it. So I think you'll see a change in pacing of the games. There will be a particular advantage if like 2 defensive armies, where the player who goes second will actually be an advantage here, because you're going to have a big last turn. So the onus is on the first turn player to basically get that lead early to be able to hold on or do enough damage to prevent that last turn from really mattering. Because, there are blowout games where it doesn't matter if you have a turn 5, you're not going to be able to do much anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it opens up the option for someone to play canny, play defensively, and knowing that they're going second, saying like, you know what, I can fall a little bit behind because I can have a massive turn 5 and really turn things around.
Right.
Yeah, I hated the 4.5 turn game. Absolutely despised it. If I had my biggest complaint about 9th edition was that the game felt too short, because that 5th turn, especially from the bottom, was so inconsequential.
Right.
This is an awesome change, really awesome change. It's going to make people totally rethink what their list is, how they approach deep striking and reserves. Super healthy change.
And I think it mirrors a lot of you look at the secondary objectives, a lot of them say, hey, score this in your command phase, unless it's the 5th turn, then score it at the end. And I think a lot of us are scratching our heads and saying, well, why doesn't the primary work that way? And now it does. And I think it's a great change. And as Brian said, there's more play there. And I think people are going to build their armies a little bit differently too, right? I think in early 9th, we saw a lot of people who were building to just get out in the midfield early, stay on objectives, kill stuff to try to stay on objectives and keep them from flipping. And you either got first turn, and statistically, more people who got first turn were winning games than not, or you still wanted to be as aggressive as you could and try to flip those objectives, right? And I think now building your army a little bit more in the middle behooves you, because if you go first, great, you have some elements that are hopefully in the mid board that can, if not hold objectives, then try to flip them if your opponent grabs them, or try to get your opponent to overreach. But more units that can sit back if you get second turn, knowing that, okay, turn 5 comes around, I could probably have a 15-point primary turn if I keep these 3 units protected until then. You know what I mean? It flips the script a little bit.
It shifts some of the power of units, because at a premium in 9th right now, it's just durable, tough units, because you have to be able to get out there and stand on it.
Mm-hmm.
This actually puts a little bit more premium on fast units and units that can hide and come out late turn. So like Drukhari, right? Are getting a new book, but they'd also be really good going second, where you can hide those little venoms and then something last turn use them all over the board.
Yep.
Stuff like that kind of gives a little bit more power to different types of units, and hopefully we'll see builds and strategies diversify a little bit because of that.
And one subtle change that I think plays into this actually is the roll-off. The winner of the roll-off takes first turn now, which I think when you think about the way that you're building lists, right? Like some people built lists where you always wanted to go second, or you always wanted to go first. Taking the choice out of your opponent's hand or out of your own hand, I think makes some very interesting decisions at the list building phase, or even in like pregame and how you're deploying. You have to deploy knowing that, hey, 50% chance I'm going to go first. So what does that mean? If I go first, to Nick's point, I have to be able to get out, get a lead, do some damage that'll be significant enough that I'm not going to be so far behind when it comes to that 5th turn for the second player, that they're just going to be able to get on all the objectives and max out on the primary, get all their secondary objectives. So I really love that subtle change.
Yep.
I think that's going to have a much bigger impact than most people think in the way that 9th edition is played.
Well, I disagree a little bit on that one.
Yeah, let's hear that.
Please, let me hear it.
Just because, initially I was sort of in the same boat, and I kind of more thought about it. I think at high level of play, you're always sort of deploying to go first or second, or you're making sure your list was balanced, right? I was making sure I have elements in my list that I could punish people if they force me to go first, or I could also still play effectively second. So ultimately, it was always a 50-50 anyway. When you're playing someone, sort of of that same level. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to just whoever wins goes first. Doesn't really change it. You'll still see both people sort of deploying conservatively, so they can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll actually help beginner games the most, because I think
I agree with you.
I think too many people were just like, oh man, I gotta go first and I'll win this game. So they just like frontline all their units. Just hope that 50-50 they win that roll if and get to choose to go first. But now subconsciously, like they just know, like, oh, it's a 50-50, like I have no control over it. Maybe they'll start deploying more conservatively, and they'll have less blowouts and less bad games, because they're starting to have to think about playing, first or second.
I agree with you completely. I think it's going to help beginner games a lot, but I don't think for the same reason. I do think you bring up a good point, but I think it's just analysis paralysis. I think there's so many times a new player comes to the game and they're not confident in their list and they're not confident in how they deploy, and then they roll off and they win the roll off and they go, okay, let me look at the board, and do I want to go first? Do I want to go second? What does this list even? What does my opponent's list do? I don't even. Do they want to go first or second? Am I handing them first turn when I shouldn't be, or whatever? And it just takes that choice out of the game. It's okay, better or worse, I'm going first or you are, and then okay, great, let's just buckle down, start rolling dice, and learn from it. You know, from a beginner perspective. So I love it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think some of the other really big changes that we saw in like the GT mission pack, one of the biggest ones, bring it down. I think this is going to single-handedly change the way that people build lists, the way people play the game in a very big way. What do you guys think?
So there was straight up orc lists that were unplayable or unviable because of bring it down. It was just too punishing. It was almost guaranteed 15 points for the opponent. And there was many other armies that were the same way. They're so limited because of the secondaries. And if you look at the haves and have-nots of 9th edition, obviously there's big just stat differences between a Marine army and any other army. But the big difference was how well your army plays to the secondaries and how little you're punished by certain particular ones like Bring It Down and Pour the Wish and things like that. So having this toned down a little bit, it's going to open up a lot of things. Because when we originally pitched 9th edition, it was pitched to us that, you know, no longer do you have to just have troops and troops and troops and build battalions and brigades and farm all these command points. Now you can build it however you want. If you want to have a list with 9 Limon Russes, have at it. But the secondaries were a big counter to that entire idea. Because if you brought all the vehicles that you wanted to have and have a nice parking lot or all the little venoms everywhere, you're going to get punished so bad by bringing it down. But now that's less the case. So hopefully it's going to open up some fun play styles that people were excited to bring, but then had to take a cold shower for come June and July. So I'm excited. Like obviously with Orks, the buggy list was badly punished by bringing it down, and this makes it a lot more viable. I still don't think it's a great list, but it's certainly a lot better now. Yeah.
So for those that aren't familiar with it, the change to bring it down is you used to score 2 points at the end of the battle round for any monster vehicle with 10 or less wounds, and now you score 1 for that same characteristic. And then anything above that, you used to score 3, now you score 2. And then anything between 11 and 19, you score 3, or was 3... 20 or more. Sorry, you get 3 points for 20 or more.
So nice.
Yeah, knights basically. Which
knights were too good, so it's like, yeah,
right. You got to bring them down again.
Take them down a notch.
Yeah.
You know?
If I had one gripe, I've got one gripe about this, and it feels like these. Brian, I know we've talked about this before. There's just like arbitrary tiering. You know, if I were to redo this, I would have loved to see something like 1 to 7 wounds, which are typically your light transports, right? Like give 1 point for that. Then your typical transport or light tanks, somewhere between 8 wounds to 12 wounds, maybe give 2 points, because that range of 11 to 19 is so vast. And you know, you're talking about you're getting 2 points for killing something with 19 wounds. That just doesn't make sense. So if you had a tiering of like light transports, get 1, transports and light armor, you get 2, tanks that are like, you know, 13 plus wounds, you're getting 3, and then knights you'd get 4. I think that makes it much more palpable. But this single-handedly, I think, makes a lot. You meant
to say knights you get 3, right? Because knights don't need to be giving up any more secondaries than they already are. They can't even score half.
But Titan Hunter should have been addressed. Speaking of which, but unfortunately, it was not.
Yeah, I do agree. Like killing an impulsor is not the same as killing a repulsor.
Or Magnus.
Yeah, Magnus is much easier.
Demon bordering on God.
Right. I mean, 2 points for killing Morty. That just doesn't feel good at all, right?
At the end of the day, you know, the secondaries were a little too constrictive on list building.
Right.
This will open it up a lot, which I'm hopeful to see.
Yeah. I mean, this, like, to your point about Drukhari, bring it down, you'd be giving up 15 points for bring it down, and probably 15 points for grind it down or grind it out or whatever it is as well, because they're just killing them venoms. And that's 30 points. I mean, that's kind of the same thing when you're playing like a Craftworld list and how you scored max points. You're getting all your bring it down points. And if I have 3 psychers in a list, which if I'm bringing Raciers, you're going to bring it down and an Abhor the Witch. Like,
well, when secondaries are half the game, no one is just going to give someone a free turn of scoring max
Right.
primary for nothing. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing when you take some of these secondaries, which are just easy to give up. So,
Right.
you know, again, I think GW realized like, oh, maybe that's a little too restrictive on this building. So, you know, they open it up a little bit, and we'll see where it goes from there. If it needs further adjustment.
I'm excited for Tyranids. I mean, they need a lot of help, but they got a lot of points change, which is great. Abhor the Witch fix helps them a lot. Bring it down helps them a lot. I think they need more like core fundamental changes in a new codex in order to really be viable. But it's definitely helpful. I mean, if you want to bring Swarm Lord and 3 Flyrants, you're not going to give up max Abhor the Witch and max Bring It Down anymore, right? So instead of giving up 8 points for each of those, you're giving up 5 for each of those models lost, right? So that's a big change, you know, across the board. So I'm excited to see more Monster Mash type lists. I think we'll see more Tervagons being used with the Gaunt Carpet, which is very thematic, I think, just because of those changes. So, you know, we'll see. I'm excited for it, though.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in list building, you're going to see people bringing monsters and vehicles that could yield a maximum of somewhere between like 7 to 10 total bring it down points, because it'll make it a tough decision for your opponent to want to bring that, especially when you're comparing it to some of the action based secondaries. So you're just forcing your opponent to make some more difficult choices. So I really do like this change. Again, I don't love the tiering, but it's better than what it was.
And it seems like that's just been GW's goal is, you know what, it should be hard to max a secondary.
Exactly right.
You should be in the right matchup and make the right moves. That's how you should max a secondary. You shouldn't automatically get Abhor the Witch versus Craftworld, right? Or whatever. So,
yeah, you shouldn't be able to drop 100 bomb on a Craftworld list. And I swear, like, it felt like I was winning that game. I think I almost tabled you and I still dropped 100 points.
Yeah, all my dudes were countering behind rocks for most of the game as those Hornets were blasting them away, but somehow they were just like,
that's the only thing I had left on the board with the Hornets, but yeah.
Like, Hornets are good, man. Hornets love Bring It Down.
Hornets are good.
They love it.
They love it.
I am just glad they went down in shots.
Yes. But I mean, exactly to your point, like things like Hornets, Wraith Lords really like this at 9 wounds, giving up 1 point. I mean, that's really big.
Big.
Yeah.
The other one, obviously, we talked about is Abhor the Witch. And I think this Grey Knights and Thousand Sun players, as well as Eldari players and Tyranid players could not be more thrilled about this change. It at least makes them viable and not just giving up 15 points every single match.
Yeah, that was a hard summer for my Thousand Sun friends. Crusade punishes psychic players even more. So having the double whammy was really rough. Glad to see it. Very glad to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to see a little bit more of a universal no stacking of secondaries. Overall, but you know, next chapter proved maybe that would be something a little bit more detailed kind of coming out of that. But who knows? Maybe these changes are enough. We'll see.
Something to think about, because ITC had some problems with that whenever they first were putting out the rule set for secondaries, and they got much better at it as they had iterations of the rule sets. So hopefully that same guiding principle will help them fix that.
Well, I mean, Mike Brand obviously was heavily involved in like the ITC stuff, and was, he's been on the Mournival forever, and now he's running GW's, tournament sort of division, whatever you want to call it. So I think this is very reflective of that mindset. I think the only thing that I would say is I'm hesitant to say that no stacking secondaries would be a good thing, because they're already so segmented. You can only take one from each category and all that stuff. So if you suddenly had that as well, I think you'd be hard pressed. So for some armies, you might not even find 3 secondaries that you can score. You know what I mean? So
some of those secondaries, though, I think could be rearranged.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Which I think also brings how I imagine that a lot of like list building and just army philosophy is going to change to building your list to be able to control your own secondaries and not rely on what is your opponent bringing to be able to get secondary points. With the change to Abhor the Witch, with the change to Bring It Down, and also the change to While We Stand, We Fight, I think it's just much more risk mitigation if you're able to build your list and say, hey, I know that I can take Scramblers, or I know that I can do Raise the Flags, or I can do While We Stand, We Fight, and be able to secure X number of points by myself without my, being able to interact with my opponent or have them foil my plan. I think is going to be a big way that 9th edition, this 9.1 is going to be changing going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Which, While We Stand, We Fight, another big change. As a Custodes player, it's more of a side grade. I don't think it was supposed to be a single model, it makes a lot more sense having it full units. But hey, you know what? Listen, if you want to try to take down 10-man squads of Custodian Guard with Storm Shields and a 6-man Alaris squad that can unleash the Lions and break out, have at it. I mean, there's still ways to be able to get to max that secondary out if you really want to.
Yeah, they're still afraid of mind bullets though.
Fair enough. That's why we
I don't
bring
like
the ladies
Mormons.
along to protect us.
For sure. I like it a lot. I think, to me, While We Stand, We Fight was always very thematic. Like, being models, it was going to be your characters, right? Typically, your characters are going to be more expensive. If you're running multiple small units, that was going to be, the case. Like, and even today, if you're running really small units, your character still might be the most expensive. But you ran into weird interactions where, like, I have the Necron Codex, and in here, there are different points for the Silent King than in the app. Like in the app, it's broken out by him, and then each of his men rears is a different cost. So if you have the app and that's what you're using for your army, then you can use the Silent King as one of your most expensive models. But if you're using the Codex and you don't have the app, then you can't, because you don't know what he costs, because the unit as a whole costs X. You know what I mean? So
but who's really using the app as Bible right now?
Yeah, I was gonna say, shame on you.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying you should use it as Bible, but it is an official product. Like, it's not wrong. It's not like someone's using Battlescribe and saying, it says he's 400 actually, or whatever. And
I do appreciate how everyone was like, yes, the app will solve the problem of multiple FAQs and typos and errors. And now they're just DJs like, here you go. Here's another source of typos and errors. We're like, no.
Another floor in the Tower of Babel.
I refuse to believe that there's any errors, and I'm going to be running 80 racks and 36 10-point Reavers. So
for under 1,000 points.
Get at me. Yeah, for like 500 points total. Get at me.
Absolutely crazy. Anything else on the GT mission changes that are worth talking through? I think we talked through some of the bigger ones here.
In summary, I think just positive steps in the right direction, and the game's getting cleaner little by little, and we'll see. We'll see if it's enough or further changes are warranted. I mean, I'm sure the game will continue to evolve.
Personally, I'm just really excited to see these at like this very specific time. I don't know about you guys, but it certainly felt like 40K was in this lull or limbo, at least for me. I haven't gotten a game in since Thanksgiving, and obviously I don't play TTS, which I should get on that. But this actually serves to like, hey, 40K is still around. There's a lot to think about. Summer's around the corner. Things are going to be opening back up, and it's something to be hopeful about and giving us something to think about, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It just seems like it's really sparked a lot of the community, because suddenly there's something new for everybody, right? And I think that's always the thing that gets people in, right? A codex drops, a portion of the community is going to be very active and vocal and finding little, synergies and things like that to talk about with the community. The edition came out, that affected everybody, and then, kind of died off. And now 6 months later, we have this FAQ does the same thing. I think they did. I think because if you think about it, we used to be on an every 6 month major FAQ schedule. It was April after
April
Adepticon, and then in the fall, right after what did they do in the fall?
October, November.
It wasn't after Nova, but it was maybe the Warhammer World Heat 3 or something like that.
It was after LVO.
LVO's in February.
No, it's
the last update. Adepticon was always the last event for the midsummer FAQ, and then there's always one again in December.
But so I think what they're going to do moving forward is that this is their 6 month cycle. They got the new edition in July, new FAQ in January. July is going to be another FAQ and chapter approved and new mission pack. Like, I think it's going to be that cycle. So I wasn't expecting it, but I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Right. I was so trained for like the April and end of October, early November release schedule that when I saw this drop, this is cool.
It had to happen though. I'll be straightforward, and I think that the meta previous to this was very, very bad. It was very off-putting for players. Well, we even outside of just stores being closed, my local groups the interest in 40K was waning significantly. This game just wasn't fun to play in some regards.
Yeah.
And having this FAQ happen, it's critical for getting the game back to a fun place. If anything, the COVID closures has been a boon to Games Workshop, because let me tell you, if the game was as unbalanced as it is right now, and there's events happening right now, the community would have been eating them alive for the past couple of months. So fortunately, we've gone dark since Thanksgiving, but these things have to happen for the game to be healthy and playable. And my personal opinion, there's still a long way for it to go to be a game that people are going to want to play at a competitive level. More books need to come out, but again, as you've all said, step in the right direction, right?
Definitely. No, couldn't agree more.
So we talked about the core rules, some of the rare rules. We went into the GT missions. One of the things I'd love to talk to is get your perspective is just how does this change your armies? I know there were some points changes, so maybe it's worth going through some of that and the way that you guys are thinking about lists and builds. Dustin, if you want to talk about some of the changes to your orcs, bring it down and some of that, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, points change. There's really only one significant points change, and that was big mechs with custom force fields are 60 points now. Why? Question mark. No idea. It's now the cheapest HQ, and it was also already the most taken one. So why they felt they needed to drop the points, I don't know, but I'll certainly take it. It definitely reinforces the idea that you probably want to play a horde of Ork boys supported by Thraka and whatever else, because that's right. It just rewards you further. That's the dominant play style, but most people these days are playing TTS, so you don't see a lot of horde play happening because who has the patience to run 150 Ork boys in TTS? I sure don't. But bring it down is great for buggies. I think it also makes the Dreadwaw a possibility, because it also the While We Stand We Fight changes reward that as well, because instead of just you kill all the dreads after they split, that's a pain in the ass. The biggest change, in my opinion, is not with the FAQ. It's actually with the Forge World book that happened a couple months back. The kill tank is a legitimately strong take. One could easily build a triple kill tank list filled with mega knobs and really wreck some faces. It's almost a list I want to be considering myself for competitive play. Yeah, exciting stuff for Orks, but we're in such a holding pattern. I think at this stage we know the book is coming, so we weren't expecting a lot of changes, and I don't think people are going to be really rethinking their lists. For people who are already playing Dreadwaw, that is a fun way to play. You'll get a little bit more out of it, but it's still not going to be a win a GT kind of list though.
Yeah. How are you planning on building some of your lists going forward? What are you thinking?
Well, I love horde play, and I love bringing the boys. It's becoming increasingly tough to do that, even with these changes. The Marine meta eats their lunch in some ways. But horde play is also a little bit of a counter, as people lean more into having to kill Marines. So that's good for us. I really do want to experiment more with the kill tank, the triple kill tank. I'd
love to see that.
I've had some extremely great success with it in TTS, but of course TTS is its whole other thing. And that also means I need to buy another kill tank, and don't tell my wife, but listen, I got a credit card ready to go.
It was just Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, I have 800 Frenchmen for black powder that I just got. So I really don't need more models, but maybe if we get some more testing on this list, we'll see.
Speaking of hordes, Nick, do you want to should we talk about the new Drukhari Horde meta?
Oh yeah, you're just taking units of 20 Cabalites, 20 Witches. You already could, but no one really did. We might as well now, and just keep the Venoms empty and keep them in the backfield to score in the bottom of turn 5. You know what I mean?
Easy peasy.
Why not? No, the 20 racks I hope is a real thing in the codex. Again, it's like we're getting conflicting info. It's in the document. It's not in the app. So somewhere there was a miscommunication at GWHQ.
But an 8-point per model rack with T5,
and that
4
feels
plus
crazy
invulnerable
too.
It is 6 plus feel no pain.
20
models deep that can with black cornucopians for 2 CP come back again.
And which is a 10 still. That has
and it isn't limited as like a once per game either. You can do that as many times. You know how much firepower it would take to be able to clear out 20 racks in a single turn?
Yeah,
you were riling me up.
Player.
I feel like
8-point boys, you were riling me up, buddy. I'm about to get hot over here. I gotta do a little bit of this. You keep talking.
I'm telling you. So, I mean, personally, I would love to see that, but also I don't think that's healthy for the game. What I also don't think is healthy for the game are 10-point Reavers. But
I mean, no, there's
all
no
up
way.
in your business.
I'll take it. Listen, it's one of those things again where it's like, I'll take it. Dark Eldar were really good in 5th. They weren't really all that hot through 6th and 7th. A little bit in 6th. 8th. Nah, I mean,
I think they nailed the codex in 8 though. They did a really good job.
I thought
they nailed the feel of it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think their power level was good on release in 8, I thought.
Yeah, it was
they
when
came
really
out
started
around the same time as Necrons did. That that first year after the game came out too, which was good, right? It was
I
the
think
spring of 18.
ITC evolved a little bit more to kind of start leaving them behind, and then like
Yeah,
Ninth
that's
was very
fair.
kind to them. But
That's fair. But I mean, listen, I agree. I don't think 10-point Reavers is necessarily going to be the best thing, and I would expect it, if it is officially the real price point, then you will see that go up to, I don't think it'll go back to 20, but 15, 18, 17, somewhere in there.
My guess, though, is that they swapped the Reaver and the Hellion points.
That's my guess, too, because there's no reason a Hellion should have gone up to.
Right.
They're
Take a lot of Hellions.
Because people were taking
the
Hellion, but it was just out of control.
I have like 30 of them because they're awesome. But
cool.
I took him in 5th when I had Duke Sliskus, and he could give them all kinds of cool stuff. But no, I mean, that's just not. So there's a lot of questions there. I'm also curious because, like, we saw the Dark Angels. They have a couple new units in their list of points. We didn't see any new units for Dark Eldar, which I have a hard time believing that they're not going to give us something. We haven't gotten any new units we got new models here and there, but they were
Vect
for units that already existed. So we have to be getting Vect. Like, the plastic Lord of War train is full speed ahead. No
you're getting the Silent King.
Pleasure barge.
You know what I'm saying? It has
the whole
to
party barge. Absolutely right.
We need lieutenant level characters so we can build functioning armies. Yep. You know what I mean?
Draken,
stuff like that. I don't think we need much more than that. Plastic mandrakes would be awesome. Plastic grotesque would be awesome, and it would fit the theme of.
You mean you don't want the one pose model?
I mean, listen, I'll take it. I'm not going to say no. I've got fine cast models. It's fine, but I'd rather have awesome
fine
plastic
cast models
kits.
are not fine.
I mean, I don't think they're that bad, but whatever. I'd rather have plastic, but so I'm excited. The Codex is coming, so we'll know more then. I don't want to put too much thought into, the next 4 or 6 weeks, whatever it is, of using these points with, because it's all going to change. But
I think three things that I was excited about. Obviously, bring it down, makes Venom spam viable again. You're not just giving up 30 points for bringing it grinded down. It also helps out Talos as well. They saw a slight points drop, they 5 points, but hey, that helps. But they're not giving up 2 points per kill anymore, right? And Talos is not something that's easy to bring down, so that's actually viable again. And if the racks do get to go up to squads of 20,
or even just 8 points, even if they can't go squads of 20, but they drop by 4, they take a 33% point drop.
That was sort of my gripe about playing Drukhari. I've only gotten about 3 games in with them at 9th edition, but it just felt like, man, against all the other armies that I played, they ended up getting hit the most with points. Like, I feel like I was fielding so much less on the table in 9th edition than I was in 8th.
Yeah.
I just didn't have the same tools. I didn't have the same ability to impact the board as I did and how some of the other armies ended up playing out with points.
Fly changes hurt. Not as bad as Tau, but fly changes hurt them a lot.
Yeah, that too. So I think those are some of the cool changes for Drukhari, though.
I mean, and they have good units that you can. I mean, you see, there are lists that go out and they win tournaments or they place really highly, but a lot of them too. Yeah, Skari is crushing it. But the other thing too is you see a lot of those lists are triple Reapers. Skari's famous for using his Tantalus to good effect. Like, that's not going to be something that happens. That's, again, it's always one of those things where as a competitive player, you have to look at everything holistically, including Forge World, and see what we can make work. But, call a spade a spade. Forge World isn't just as accessible for a lot of people, right? So it always, even though it's officially part of the game and all that stuff, I think there's always going to be that little asterisk in people's minds of like, yeah, but Triple Reapers isn't the Codex, right? It's not like they messed up with the Codex if you have to go that route or whatever. So, I'm very, very hopeful for the Codex next month. I think next month, right?
Hopefully, within the month, I imagine. You want to talk about Necron?
I'm excited about Necrons. They didn't get a lot of changes, but they did. They got a couple of changes that I think are cool. The Triarch Stalker got a new keyword, which it should have had anyway, because it had quantum shielding, which is an ability, and then there's a stratagem that gives them a 4-up invulnerable save if they're targeted in the shooting phase. But it only affects units that have the quantum shielding keyword. They had the ability, not the keyword. Right. Now they have both. So now you can use that stratagem on them. And Triarch Stalkers are really good in the Codex. They're a great little unit. They're kind of chunky for like a Dreadnought, analog. But they have great melee now. The Heat Ray is an awesome weapon. Benefits from some of the changes to the Flamers and things like that. So just gets better that you can give it a 4-up invuln now if you need to. And then the other real change was the Reanimator dropped by 30 points, which I think is awesome. I mean, it's a cool little model. Everybody's got a bunch kicking around from the Indominus set. You know, I think it's not going to be the next competitive thing where everyone's going to bring, you know, 120 warriors and 3 Reanimators, although that might actually work. But I don't know. I think about it like they dropped 30 points. They went from 110 to 80. And so now if you were going to take 2 of them in a list at some point, that's 220 points. Well, for 240, now you can take 3 of them. So, right. You know, in my mind, that's good value. I don't think that's going to be, again, I don't think that's like the next, you know, hot Necron list. I think, you know, Scarabs and Canoptic with OBSEC is going to be here for a while. But it's exciting. It at least gives me a reason to try to put it on the board and get some use out of it. So
I feel like Necrons are in such a good place right now.
I totally agree.
So happy to see them doing well, and it's just fun to. I think GW nailed the Necron book.
And it feels good to play them, no matter who you are. Any army has a good time with Necrons.
No, speak for yourself. I have not enjoyed my games with Necrons, but
Space Wolves love playing Necrons, right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say there is a subtle thing whenever I play against a Necron player. I do actually like it when they remove the model and then put it back, so I at least feel a little better about myself. As when I shoot down.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I killed effectively like 3 Necron warriors in a turn.
Yeah. I will say this isn't in any of the FAQs, but it just came to mind when he was talking about removing models and putting them back. But it has come to light that a lot of people seem to be misinterpreting the reanimation rule and how models are placed back. And so it is interesting that by the letter of the rules, you need to place the models back in unit coherency. And so as soon as you go to place a model that suddenly makes the unit 6 or more, you might have an illegal unit after you're done reanimating. So you only check for unit coherency in the morale phase, right? And after you make a move. But so it doesn't, my interpretation of it is that it doesn't automatically make the unit illegal as soon as you place the model, or that if you're not allowed to place anymore.
When you set up models, you have to set up within coherency.
You have to set up the model within coherency, but the unit coherency is only checked after a move by the whole unit.
Not necessarily. So like if I have a 10-man unit during deployment, I can't deploy my men out of coherency and then during my move-in turn move them in.
Correct.
When you're setting them up during deployment, they all have to be.
But you're talking about the unit coherency check itself, right, Nick?
Yes.
There's a separate check at the end of the phase where you're talking about losing part of your unit that's out of coherency, but you can't actively set up units out of coherency.
Right.
Correct. You can't set up a unit, but you can set up an individual model that is revived. If it's not possible,
I would challenge you on that one.
I've looked at the rules backwards and forwards. We can do a whole podcast about it if you want.
Please,
but it does not say. It says that each model must be placed in coherency, and coherency is defined as 2 inches or 2 inches of 2 models. So that individual model needs to be placed within 2 inches of 2 models, or it can't be placed. But if you have, like, let's say I had a line of 20 warriors or whatever that were, 10 and 10 or whatever, and because the way that the casualties happened, I needed to do them in such a weird way in order to like string out to an objective and an aura or whatever. If I'm reanimating, I can reanimate them back, but there will come a point where perhaps it's impossible to place a model such that everyone is within 2 inches of 2 models, right? Some guy out here might not be. By the letter of the rules, that's okay, as long as the next time this unit moves, I bring them back together. Otherwise, at the end of the morale phase, they will, implode. But again, that's something a lot of people didn't. In
practice, I bet it rarely even comes up anyway.
Right, exactly. It's going to be a unique situation, but it was an interesting, sort of clarification that came up.
Yeah.
I think it came up after, I forget somebody's bat rep, but there was some comments about that, and I looked it up, and kind of interesting how it reads a little bit differently than people I think are playing it. So that has nothing to do with the FAQ though, so we can cut that whole section.
It's worth talking about. So I'll talk about some Custodes changes. Virtus Praetors dropped 10 points. Awesome to 85. What else? Custodian Guard got points. Yeah, Telemon stayed the same, which is great. My list actually gained 110 points back. So the Vexillus Praetor, the one with the Magnifica that I always brought, they don't have to pay for their banner anymore. So, you know, the 30-point banner is now free for the 85-point model.
That's
I'm
awesome.
dropping 50 points on my bike squad, and I'm saving 15 points per squad, if not more, for my guard. I gain 110 points back in my Custodes list, which
What are you gonna do?
well, see, that's the thing. There's
By an Inquisitor.
endless possibilities.
You know, we've seen 55-point Acolytes in chapter approved. I want to see 10-point
Mhm.
Custodian Guard in squads of 20. Just
That-
like
The list that I
Custodian, new
played
horde.
hasn't been beaten yet, and it's just like, oh, and you're giving me 110 more points back? Like, it just feels wrong, I'll say, especially the Vexillus Praetor. That guy shouldn't be 80, 85 points. He just absolutely shouldn't. I think the Virtus Praetor drop, that is fine. 85 points is palpable. Guard, you know,
Keep it a war boss.
you know, we dressed in gold. You know, we bring the glitz and the glam.
There's
But
a-
overall, the changes to while we stand, we fight. It's more of a side grade. I think it's fine. Custodes are in a very good place right now. Overall, my list really didn't change too much. I'm running 2x5 now, Custodian Guard with sword and board, and I gained a 6th Virtus Praetor in the list, which is incredible. So a little bit more durable, a little bit more firepower. Pretty excited overall.
my
That's
I'm
awesome.
gonna
blast
slap you with my blast with your 6-man unit.
Let's. Do you want to talk about Tyranid, Nick?
I mean, it's sure. I'm excited. Abhor the Witch changes help them a lot. Big guns, or what is it called? Sorry, not big guns that retire. That's an entirely different
Bring him
thing.
down.
Bring it down.
Bring them down. Thank you. That helps them a lot. Their points dropped all over the board, which helps them a lot. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's one of those things where I think the Gaunt Carpet is still going to be like the go-to if you really want to be competitive with NIDS. I think triple lictors to do actions and stuff like that is going to help still. I don't think you're going to play the army really any different. Yes, the monsters got a little bit more viable, but I think at their core, they still need a little bit extra help in 9th edition, especially to really take that next step. The Psychic Awakening stuff is still really awesome, and I think it did a lot to help make some of the less used monsters. And you're starting to see a lot more exocrines and things like that, which if you were going to bring triple exocrine in a list, a year or two ago, you would have been crazy. Now I think it's viable. So there's a lot of good stuff there, right? I think they're doing the right things. To Dustin's point, same thing with Orks, right? Like they're doing a lot of the right things. They're moving in the right direction. It's not a bad thing, right? But ultimately, I think that's just the codex is what we're waiting on to really see if we can shake up,
Right.
the meta and just list building sort of in general. So,
Yeah,
but
makes
I'm
sense.
excited. I mean, it's gotten me thinking about my NIDS in ways that I haven't thought about them since Psychic Awakening dropped. So it's good.
Nice. We'll do Craftworld and then we'll get to the Space Marines. But I think overall, Craftworld, they were in a weird place in 9th edition because they always felt like they were doing fine when you played them on the tabletop. But then you look at the score, you're like, damn, I'm like just way behind. And a lot of it just had to do with our troops stunk. Like we didn't have troops that could play the primary very well. And if you wanted to bring a list that could stand toe-to-toe with your opponent, you had to lean into your strengths, which is either psychic abilities and mech. And, Abhor the Witch, you're giving up 15 points. Our psychers aren't necessarily the toughest things to kill. And our vehicles, which are numerous outside of the Wave Serpent, aren't that difficult to kill either. So, I mean, you're giving up a lot of lists. We're giving up 15, bring it down. You could get 15 Abhor the Witch off of us. And even though it was feeling pretty competitive on the board, you were just falling behind. So I love that the points changes to all of the Eldari troops was great. It gives us more bodies. We can play the primary a little bit more effectively than we were before. Bring it down. We can bring vehicles, which most of our firepower comes on vehicles, and still stay competitive. Abhor the Witch means we can bring some psychers and have some more psychic support to keep those troops alive, to make our units more effective. And overall, I think these are great changes. They weren't too heavy-handed in my opinion, but there was just enough to keep us more competitive in the scoreboard. I think we felt fine on the tabletop. It was just really when you looked at the scoreboard, you're just like, man, it feels like I just have this insurmountable obstacle to overcome, especially when you're playing at Space Marines, who usually jumped out to a big
Yeah.
lead anyway.
Yeah, so do you think you can actually take a warlock now?
Who knows, right? Like it's a brave new world for us. Yes,
Yeah, even on bike, you're like, I don't know about this.
I mean, exactly
guy that's
right.
Gonna give up 5 points.
I mean, easy
Yeah.
5 points. I mean, I love Wraith Seers and they would give up 10 points every kill if you brought a Wraithseer. But now, you know, I can bring Wraithseers, I can bring Warlocks, sure, and I can have 2 Farseers if I want and just lean into that psychic support.
And those runes of battle are
Two?
powerful.
They are so good. So I'm excited to see that. I mean, that in of itself has gotten me more excited about Craftworld. I mean, of my close to 50 games in 9th edition, 30 of them have been Custodes, just because every one of my games with Eldari they just weren't as fulfilling. And this has me excited about going back to the lab and thinking about some good lists for the Eldari. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Anything you want to talk about Harlequins, Brian? I mean, I think Bring It Down helps them a bit too, but they were relatively untouched.
Yeah, I mean, Bring It Down was less for me because I ran more foot troops.
Right. Same.
Overall, either way. I mean, but Harlequins are really strong. Oddly, right, the White Horse supplement was really
The best.
strong. So,
Yeah, it was so weird.
So yeah, having one of the strongest psychic awakening showings out of a White Dwarf is pretty interesting. But you know, I mean, they were already really good. And you know, I think they'll just continue to be strong because again, they're good at playing the mission.
Right.
They have the speed too, so like stuff like the changes to how going second is scored now, that really only helps fast armies, and Harlequins are amongst the fastest as well. So
they have the speed to be aggressive when going first. Abhor the Witch helps them too if you're bringing 2 Shadow Seers. If anybody brought that, Bring It Down. If you were doing like the Flying Circus with, you know, Star Weavers, it helps you.
Pistols and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of fusion pistols. So nothing hinders them here. It's all just net positive for Harlequins. I think they're just still the best Eldari faction. Okay, Brian, Space Wolves. You want to talk about what you're thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, so overall for Marines, like nothing too drastic, right? A couple points adjustments to, you know, some problematic units.
Wait a minute. Space Marines have problematic units?
The Inceptors, you know, units that were just a little too good.
ATVs.
But yeah, you know, the weird gimmick stuff like apothecaries,
Right.
Resi ATVs, which everyone knew was like too ridiculous. So they finally addressed that. You know, Inceptors went up by 5 points, Eradicators went by 5 points, Outriders went up by 5 points. You know, nothing really too major. And for at least for a Space Wolf player, probably the biggest thing was just the FAQs clarifying that your abilities that put you into the Assault Doctrine still count as activating your Super Doctrine, essentially. Because there were some miswordings in the supplement for Space Wolf where it was kind of in question if it actually would work that way. So it's nice to get that clarification. But I think really as a Marine player, you should feel like, all right, this is still business as usual. Because we talked about the ability to build your army list to play secondaries that you know you can score. The Codex is having strong secondaries that you can choose from for only Space Marines is really powerful. Oath of Moment is one of my go-tos. You know, it's one I maxed in all of tournaments.
Must be nice.
Every single, yeah, it really is, and that's part of the big advantage. You know, when Dustin talks about, you know, sort of the mismatch in these armies, it's, you know, it's not just because Eradicators are a little too cheap, but it's all these sort of tools that you have available. And I think when we went into 9th edition, you're sort of looking at, oh man, it's going to be either more about what you do on the table rather than what you bring to the table. And I think if that's true about any army, it's definitely Space Marines, because we're spoiled with choices. I could probably write 100 different Space Wolf lists, which will all be good. So, you know, when people always ask me like, oh, what are you running? What do you plan to do? I think you really can get away with a lot more varied. There's no one right way to build a Space Marine army. I know a lot of people gravitate towards Thunderbolt Cavalry right now because they're obviously good. But for me, like, they lost a lot of the flexibility in the stratagem. So I started looking at other units. And I think what you have to do, particularly as a Space Wolf and just as a Space Marine player, is when you look at a unit, look at its pros, which a lot of people do, but also look at the cons. And this is most important when you're trying to compare two very similar units that fill very similar roles, but the Space Marines have so many choices, there'll be slight differences between the two, which will actually have an impact on what you do on the table.
Right.
You know, I've had chats with people where, you know, even Nick, where we talked about Plasma Inceptors versus Hellblasters, and like things like Hellblasters are kind of like, you know, left to the wayside by most players. But, you know, I started experimenting a little bit with like Assault Hellblasters, you know, not overcharging, just using the volume. They each put 3 shots. You know, Strength 6 is a really nice magic number right now where you're decimating Toughness 3. You're killing a lot of the T5 that's out there. where normally the overcharge of the other plasma doesn't help you because you're only going to strength 8. So on paper you're looking like, oh well, Inceptor's probably just a little bit better, but things like the little bit of extra range, the 6 inch of extra range matters a lot.
Yep.
The AP4 is actually very, very nice for
Huge.
shooting against
so
Marines
good.
in cover
Yep.
versus AP3. So these little subtle differences matter, right? And then if you're playing something like White Scars right now, that's why I was talking to Nick about them, or like Space Wolves, where you have all these other threats which are forward and more immediate that your opponent has to face.
Aggressive. Yep.
You can get away with, okay, well they're 2 wounds at T4, but they're not being shot at much. So they fit a similar role in like a Space Wolf or a White Scar list, but they can get you slightly different output than using something like Inceptors. And I think you have to take that approach in looking at units of the Space Wolf army, and general for Space Marines. I know a lot of my lists, I always focus on tactical flexibility and deployment flexibility, which is actually going to be a bigger boon for the second how the primary is scored for me as well, because my list, I like being able to deploy forward or deploy back. And I still value things like impulsors really highly. They aren't these sort of little just like pinatas that like fly at the board and hold objectives and like you kill them and like boom, oh look, intercessors popped out. Now I think you actually use their assault move rule. Their role changes slightly, where now you can use their speed and movement. And I do a lot of things where I'm running with like incursors, assault marine or assault intercessors, and I have like my Hounds of Mordecai, which I have to take now, and a couple of readers and like Blade Guard veterans. All those things can slot into an impulsor. You can vary what you're doing, and I can change up how I'm deploying and how I'm playing the game with some of these strategies and stuff. And I'd have to probably do a whole article or a whole podcast on just how the list plays itself. Because again, going more for that flexibility, and again, focusing on what are the pros, what are the cons for that unit.
Yeah, that flexibility is so key. It's one of the reasons why Space Marines are so good right now, especially in the hands of a skilled player like yourself. Nick, anything else you want to add about Space Marines in general? I know you got your White Scars.
No, I mean, my White Scars, it's the same story as the Space Wolves, right? It's the assault doctrine, really turning on turn 3 and beyond. And once that turns on, we're just so deadly in combat. Even my basic intercessors are, AP -1 damage too, just with their gummy little fists. Like, you can do a lot of damage.
Little
so
combat knives.
That's true. That's true. But that you have all these threats up front, and so I haven't bought Inceptors since the first starter set for 8th edition when the Primaris made their debut. And they're unpainted. And there's always, I think, as a competitive player, that temptation to look at, hey, what lists are winning? And then looking at your pile of shame and going, maybe I could just meet 5 Inceptors. Who's it going to hurt or whatever? But, Brian and I got into conversations about how, well, yeah, if we ever play again. But we got into conversations about exactly that, just to reiterate and not be long-winded about it, but there are just so many data sheets in this book, and a lot of them are really, really good. Like, you almost can't go wrong. And so, looking for that sort of mid-level strength and high AP is sort of what you're looking for when you're looking for like Inceptors or Hellblasters or something in that range. And I find that, just doing the math, the Hellblasters with Assault Plasma Incinerators can do a lot of work, right? They're cheaper than Inceptors, now even more so. With my Advance and Fire Without Penalty, they actually have longer threat range than Inceptors, even though they're like these flying jump pack units with a massive move. An average advance roll gets my Hellblasters targeting stuff that's 34 inches away, whereas the Inceptors are only shooting at 31 or whatever. So, I mean, it's still close, right? But the consistency of the firepower being Assault 3 versus D3, stuff like that, in the AP4, I just think there's a lot to like there. So, I think, again, just the changes that they've made to the points in general, I think are good changes. They're a step in the right direction. I don't think it's world shattering. Eradicators aren't suddenly bad. Inceptors aren't suddenly bad. Outriders aren't suddenly bad. I do think if you're running a tight list that was 2,000 on the nose, you're definitely going to have to move some things around, right? You're not getting your cake and eating it too. So those 15, or, you're taking squads of 5. So whatever that is, you're, I can't do math right now. 25 points. Thanks. Thanks. you're gonna have to find that somewhere, right? So where is that? Is that in your company veteran Lightning Claw, Storm Shield guys? Are you taking some of your Vanguard vets away? Are you giving them chain swords instead? What are you gonna do with that? And it's gonna change, your list overall. So there's definitely gonna be some changes to how I run my White Scars moving forward. But I think the general theme stays the same.
Yeah, I'd say one more thing I would throw out to Marine players. I think a lot of 40K players in particular get into this trap of like maximize everything, and they're like, all right, I need rerolls a hit, rolls a 1, and you rerolls a wound, rolls a 1, and I kind of got to get everything maximized. Where 9th edition is a little bit more about putting just enough points in different parts of the board to score effectively and efficiently is the sort of key there, right? You won't have the points to have an HQ's babysitting every single thing. You're not going to have the roles that you're that used to be spoiled with before. So you have to learn sort of when good enough is actually the target.
Huge.
And a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm going to squeeze in a lieutenant here. And for this case, I'm just like, well, you'd probably be better served by just another intercessor squad. Okay, you don't get the rerolls, but now you have more flexibility and sort of building little elements like that into a list I found much more effective because, the game 9th is much less about hero hammer than it sort of used to be.
Yeah, exactly right.
Totally.
Although my Incarn would beg to differ, but you're absolutely right. Even in my Custodes list,
my Redemptor had something to say about that.
Oh, don't even remind me of that. That was good. But I mean, to your point, like even in my Custodes list, I dropped Trajan a long time ago, and I haven't looked back. Yeah, he's great. He gives you 3 free CP if you're using Stooping Dive or Teleport Homer. But exactly to your point, like Custodes are an elite army. 180 points gets you enough somewhere else that you can start scoring points efficiently, and you haven't looked back. Like there's something to be said for having some of that, standalone operator type of deal, and not being tied to a castle or anchored to a specific area of the board, which isn't conducive to winning 9th edition games as it was 8th edition. So I mean, exactly to those points.
Yeah, because like Space Wolves, we lost. Touch of the Wild was a like
that needed to go.
That's I'm sad to see it go because it was so much fun. Like in that bad.
I'm glad you got to enjoy it though.
I killed over 20 Necron warriors with Ragnar with it, but it was too good, and it was really a crutch that you had to rely on. Like you needed those characters to hit that hard. But instead, Space has got great access to a stratagem for one CP. Let your units get +1 to wound if they charged, and little things like that, which make your units sort of operate very independently, is very, very powerful. And now, I'm surprised even my Reavers can do some work now, which is a little bit of +1 to wound and things like that. So, looking for units that can operate independently and effectively, which again, the Space Marine they have that strong core stat line for an aggressive point cost, makes them very good at that.
Yeah. Dustin, I know you've dabbled in Guard and Chaos. Is there anything that you want to chime in there from those perspectives?
A lot of Demon players are happy with the changes for secondaries for sure.
Yep.
The Slanesh list with lots of keepers and secrets has been really coming to prominence, and I've seen some of those lists compete very, very well versus Marines players. I know that in the finals for Dragonfall, the Space Wolves were fighting off of a bunch of Slanesh keepers and secrets. That's good because I always love to see a lot of Demons lists. There's a lot of fun with those models. Some more variety there is always a great thing. A lot of Chaos players, like the rest of us Xenos players, we're not holding action. Who knows how things are going to shake out until we get extra wounds in our Marines, what our data sheets are going to look like. A lot of positivity coming out of the Forge World book, having those all those dreads come back into the fold for them. There's a brief moment where there's a lot of salty 1000-7 players. But overall, I think Chaos Demons in particular are pretty healthy place, and they'll certainly be more healthy after the FAQ. As for the Marines themselves, it's a tough spot.
They just really need their book, I think is what
they need it.
I think Death Guard will set the tone for Chaos players. So I think you'll have more than just Nurgle's favorites looking at that book to kind of get an idea of what's coming out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think people are starting to move away from hordes and hordes and hordes of Nurglings as well, and starting to explore other aspects of it. Just the big debate is how many keepers and secrets are going to be in your list, because they are really required to function well. As for Imperial Guard, well, let's just say at least they're not Tau. Not a great spot for Imperial Guard right now. And the secondary changes are not enough to put them in a place where they want to be.
They're still giving up max.
they're still giving up max, and they don't have the resiliency. They can't fight really well in the melee phase. So hopefully their new book is coming soon, but I think they're in for a little bit of a wait. So sorry, current players.
I do like lists that lean a little bit into the power of scions and things like
100%.
that. I think scions are the way to go, but they just fall over too easy. T3, that's a rough place to be when you have no invuln save. And there's just so much AP floating around right now. So if you're an Orc player or if you're an Imperial Guard player, so much of the game you just don't get a save. This is how the edition is right now. And that's really punishing for high point cost scions. But still, if you're going to play them, probably want to go that way along some tank commanders.
So it's a little bit of a theory craft, but do you think it would make sense? Because I have thought this and had this discussion with people before, that whenever the Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard, whenever they get their book, I think it'd be really cool for them to have like a lot of secondaries that they could pick, like not just 3 or whatever. But I think it would be very flavorful. I think that would help them a lot too, just to give them more options.
Feels thematic. Feels very
thematic. Yeah, there's a lot of ways they can go with the book too. That there's so many different regiments that have like these great archetypes attached to them, and you can really put a lot of stuff and a lot of effort into it. Will that happen? Who knows? we can wish list literally all day on cool stuff they can implement for them. But we'll see. It could be a great book.
So I'll touch on Grey Knights really quick, because I think they're in a much better place, obviously, post the FAQ with the change to Abhor the Witch. The way that I had been building my lists are basically around like 3 or 4 big blocks of either 10-man pallies, a 10-man Terminator squad, 10-man strike squad, or 10-man interceptor squads, just so like, I could take advantage of dynamic insertion, blow somebody off an objective and steal it, essentially, and then try to stay around, but also keeping bigger units so I'm not giving up max Abhor the Witch. So I think, overall, they're in a much better place by not just, you're not always going to be giving up 15 points, likely you are, but they're just in a slightly better spot there. Actually, the change to going second and how you score helps them immensely with Gate of Infinity. I mean, that's a way for them to be able to get some points where they're not the most mobile army when they're on the board. So if they're not where they were, you weren't going to be scoring, on the bottom of that last turn there. So that certainly helps them out a lot as well. Overall, I think they're fine. Psychic actions may or may not hurt them quite as much. I mean, I had personally dedicated a chaplain for psychic actions for them because, he still gets his litany at the beginning of the command phase, and then he can go off to his psychic action and doesn't really impact his output so much. But overall, I think they're okay. Not really much more to speak about that, but they'll be fine. Any other faction worth talking on?
Worth talking on? No. I was gonna say
skipping Tau completely.
Yeah, skipping Tau, skipping Knights, skipping Chaos Knights. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think overall the FAQs were, more minor tweaks and movements in the right direction. A lot of these major changes are going to happen are just going to, unfortunately, going to have to be in the codexes. Whenever they can roll them out.
And that's always kind of how it's been, you know what I mean? It just, for whatever reason, it feels, I think it's just, there's been such a dearth of action in the competitive scene that we're really feeling that right now of like, just need a couple more books and then we can all get excited.
Right.
So
it's certainly felt like beta mode 9 version, 9th edition, but this is really exciting, I think, to keep kickstarting up the community again, get people excited about. Hopefully when things open back up, we might even get some events here in 2021. That would be awesome. We'll go into we had a couple of questions from the GDFC members within our Discord. Mr. Funky Fresh 70, from first impressions and reactions of 9th to today, what did you think was going to be good and wasn't, or what did you think was going to be bad and is now good?
I mentioned it earlier in our discussion that there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement surrounded around armies that could be more diverse and less reliant on troops. So bringing a lot of elites, bringing a lot of heavy support, making the list that you like to list, as opposed to like really skewing. But as we saw with the primary missions, that is definitely not the case. Troops are more important now than they were in 8th edition.
Yep.
So if you had your hopes of having an all dreadnought army, well, don't do it. It's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea. So that's a lot of sour grapes for a lot of people. Because I as much as I do enjoy playing competitively, I probably play most of my games on a casual basis. So I had a lot of casual players who were super excited about that, and it just wasn't what it was supposed to be for them.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say I had dreams of sort of that happening for all armies, where you can bring sort of whatever you want. Again, it's more about what you do on the table rather than what you bring to the table. And unfortunately, I feel like it's very true for Marines. But really, it's kind of,
It is.
it's like, but unfortunately, it's only really true for Marines.
Necron's a little, but
Necron's a
mostly
little,
Marines.
Yeah, but I think the secondary design was crushing a lot of that. So hopefully that expands it out. And again, I'm excited for the Death Guard book. I'm excited for the Drukhari book, just so we can see more outside of how they're going to treat sort of these other armies. Because hopefully, when the dust settles, GW soon, when all the books finally do make it out, like hopefully that it is a true thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited about the Drukhari book too, because it's a completely different army archetype versus like Necron and Death Guard. Implacable, durable, slow type of units. But Drukhari, if they can nail Drukhari, God, I will feel so confident that GW is going to nail the rest of these armies in the way that they feel and play on the tabletop.
That's all I'm
I think
for.
that's big too with because like the primary rewards, that's sort of like tough resiliency, which like Necrons and Death Guard, that's what they're known for. That's good. If the sort of like fragile speed and death by 1,000 cuts of Drukhari they can make that feel work with the primary, then it's high. I think it's high hopes for the rest of the armies.
Yeah. I think for my part, I think the biggest thing that I was excited about coming into ninth, and again, it kind of reflects off of what Dustin was saying, is the changes to vehicles made it seem like, okay, we're firing into combat. You can't really wrap us anymore. Like, I think vehicles are going to have their day. It's going to be back to, I forget what edition it was when they first introduced the idea of like hull points, but for a brief moment there with hull points, all of a sudden vehicles were like way more, effective because you couldn't just kill them in one hit anymore, right? It always took multiple whatever. I thought that was going to play out again, and it didn't really because of the way the primary is designed, because of the way the secondary was designed. It was almost like Games Workshop felt like, yeah, we're going to make vehicles really good, but just so you don't only take vehicles, because that's unhealthy, we're going to let everyone max secondaries against you if you do, so that's, kind of a bummer. So again, these changes help that a lot. And I think we'll see, with some of the more vehicle heavy sort of archetypes armies, like I think of Astra Militarum, whatever happens with them, I think will be very indicative too of sort of that next phase of 9th edition in terms of how they're going to be portrayed. So a lot of exciting stuff.
On the flip side, I think the death of hordes was something that was highly touted right at the end of 8th edition. And I think we've clearly seen that hordes were still very viable in 9th edition.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question from John Kilcullen, Space Wolf Wonder Kid, over at Northern Front. His question is, what does a post-COVID Chicago 40K community look like? Should masks be mandatory in a post-COVID world at events? Tough question, but I think it's worth going into. What do you guys think?
I feel like it's going to vary depending on how you lean politically, frankly. But I just think that, the smart thing to do, especially while we're still building up herd immunity, would be to wear masks. I don't think it's that difficult to do. I feel like by now most people are very used to wearing them, everywhere. If you do leave the house, I know, we're still pretty locked down here, but I don't think there's a negative thing to come from that kind of protection. And, I think in a world where you can somehow confirm if people have the vaccine or whatever, then maybe not, but I don't see that creates a whole nother set of issues. You know what I mean? So, it's one of those things that can be very touchy for some people, but I just don't see a negative to it.
Right.
Frankly.
Yeah, I think for me, the community, especially locally here in Chicago, like at Adepticon, I was super nervous. The first time I ever went, Adepticon was my first event ever, back in 2018, and I was just struck by like how great the atmosphere was. Right, it wasn't just the tournament games were a lot of fun, but just hanging out with all these like-minded people that were excited about the game. It really generally just like cared for each other, complimenting each other's models, talking about what everyone liked to do. And I think when you have a community like that legitimately does care about the other people, we can take the precautions to make sure that we're sort of taking care of each other. So like mask wearing, hand washing, hopefully showering deodorant becomes more mainstream in the 40K community.
But if you have a
I think
mask
that can always
on,
be a good thing.
you
but...
can't smell it.
Or if you have
Can't do
COVID,
shots,
you
though.
can't smell it either.
Oh boy.
But even with the vaccine will get distributed, I think we definitely want to just layer the protection, protect each other. If we can take precautions, take them, because ultimately you do care about the person across from you, which I think is very unique to tabletop gaming. Video gaming, you're through cyberspace. The other person could be on the other side of the world, but there's still something very intimate about playing someone in person, face to face, on an actual tabletop game. And part of that sportsmanship and making sure the players are having a good time is like, well, why not just be sure to take care of each other's health as well. So I personally do see masks for the foreseeable future. Down the line, when official guidance, CC and all that says like, hey, you know what, great job, we've eradicated it, it's no longer an issue, cool, we can relax things then. But until that word comes from actual medical and scientific authorities, all we can just do is like take precautions and do our best to take care of each other.
Right.
Yeah, as a TO, I think to Nick's point, it is going to depend politically where you're at in the city, in the area. But as for the city of Chicago, speaking as a TO, I can assure you that every store is going to be requiring masks all throughout 2021. There's no question in my mind about that. And there's going to be severe limitations of how big an event can be within the city. Now, as for the suburbs, whole different world. So my encouragement for the 40K community, if it wants to survive and to thrive in the Chicago area, let's be honest, a lot of people just aren't going to be comfortable coming into stores, or they're not going to want to deal with the rigmarole of wearing masks and the gameplay experiences. I think it's important for not only us as community members, but also the stores themselves to encourage more home groups to evolve and to welcome more people into your gaming circles. That way, if you can't have an 8-man event at the store every Saturday, maybe you're having that 8-man event at your house with people the people you associate with and feel safe with. So that means, maybe getting more terrain in the store to buy and to purchase and to have those nice tables that make a game possible and doable. And I think if there's going to be events in the city, it's probably going to be through home groups that are doing things like that. I've heard some of the East Coast is already doing some stuff like that with their big community figures. In the suburbs, who knows? It's Wild West. They might have a 40-person GT next week. Really couldn't say. But yeah, it's going to be a tough 2021, and we really have to all do our part to keep that cohesiveness.
And I agree with you. Go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, and I do think the TTS things might start hanging around as well. Like they won't completely disappear because, being forced to play online, can be kind of a bummer, but it's also an incredible boon. We at GDFC, we got to meet, people from Australia, Europe, and play people from all over the world, which never would have happened otherwise. Right. So
yeah,
those things are, that's a great little side benefit. I'm sure those things will be here to stay. Being able to just do a quick pickup game online is nice too. And I think you'll still see those digital events hanging around as well.
I think that's cool. And speaking of TTS and being connected worldwide, another one of our members, Mild Norman, who I think comes from us from out west in California, if I'm not mistaken. He basically had asked, are we planning on doing a State of the Union for GDFC? And I would say, like, what are some of the objectives that we have for ourselves and our community at large next year-ish? I think overall, we want to get back to a place where we can start producing regular content. Obviously, COVID happened right in the middle of, us being able to record bat raps, and we wanted to make sure that we were being socially responsible with our community. So we were encouraging everybody to quarantine, stay at home. People were obviously getting games in one-on-one with their friends who they felt comfortable with, but we just didn't feel that it was the right thing for us to be able to sponsor or hold events. Now, we were fortunate enough to partner with Dragonfall, and Dustin did an awesome job of TOing the Dragonfall TTS event. Ideally, in 2021, when things start to become more safe for us to do so, would love to be able to connect the Chicagoland 40K community with some sort of events. I know we had this big 40K Tournament of Madness planned last year, March, which would have been a really cool event against, regional stores and, the sort of March Madness type of environment. So, maybe something like that could be doable. Do those games one-on-one. But overall, I think from a GDFC perspective, love to get back to regular content from an article perspective. We need to get Nick's White Scars on the table ASAP in a bat rep. Those things are so beautiful. So that's got to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we check out his Instagram page. Is that Chicago?
I haven't updated it in forever. But after I watched The Social Dilemma in like August,
That's right. I forgot about that.
I just haven't posted in forever. But no, there's some stuff up there. I probably should become more active, and putting that stuff out there. But no, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat, right? Like all the GDFC members and content creators and writers and authors and podcast editors, and we all want to do more. And COVID just hit our group a little bit harder than it did others, and we just made the decision to focus on our family groups, and some of us lost jobs, some of us had new children and stuff like that. It's just a lot going on, right? Many of us are fathers, as Dustin said, and that when you're on lockdown and you have 2-3 children, toddlers, and young children running around, there isn't a lot of time for writing about chaos nights or whatever. So I think that's really just sort of where our focus was for anybody who was curious. And I fielded some questions on Reddit as well recently, especially saying like, hey, you guys are back, like what have you guys been up to? And we're fortunate enough to getting back to stability. And I think this FAQ has really sort of sparked our team and shown us that, okay, we've got the excitement is back, and now we're ready to look at 2021 as sort of a new world. So we're excited to get back to regular content for sure.
And I think our Discord community has been fantastic. The other part of what Mild Norman says is, what do you need from the game community to make it meaningful? I mean, it's basically you all. I mean, it's an incredible community of folks who are very positive, encouraging, they support each other. And that's part of one of the filthy casual sort of, mandates, is that we're here to support each other and help each other grow. And being part of filthy casual is we have other obligations that may, believe it or not, take higher precedence and priority than tabletop gaming. But, again, at the end of the day, we're excited to try to get back to producing regular content. Ideally, we would be able to help facilitate some events. I know our big goals are to be able to put regular RTTs and even grand tournaments together in the Chicagoland area whenever it's safe to do so, which would be awesome. Regular battle reports, podcast articles, et cetera, et cetera. So encouragement, the positive vibes are all really meaningful for us. If you want to join our Discord, feel free to reach out to us. You can get to us through Facebook, Instagram. Hit us up at grimdarkfilthycasuals or
DM me on
grimdarkfilthycasuals at gmail.com. DM them at Reddit. Find us on the Chicagoland 40K Facebook group. However you want to get a hold of us, feel free. And we'd love to have you in our Discord group. But
leave a like and a comment.
Leave a like in the comment. That's right. It's been a while since
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. Get them alerts.
Is there anything else you guys want to add before we close this one out? It's great hanging out with you guys again. I can't wait to be able to do this in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm very positive and optimistic about this next year, just in terms of the hobby, the community, this group, our content. I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. I think every time we get together, I have a good time. And we definitely love to do, another bat rep again.
I love you too.
We love getting all the content out to the community, and we definitely love hearing your feedback. So, thank you guys for being great. And the feedback we do listen to, we do enjoy. So keep it coming.
Close us out, Brian.
Oh, well, I guess this has been GDFC podcast number 8. It's been on a little bit of hiatus, a little bit of real life in the interim, but we will be around. We'll be working our way back, and we will be bringing stuff to you. So we'll see you all out there on the battlefield.